fifth.
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? It's Thomas's Torture Time, as always. Triple T here with my boy Dalsu and my boy Perry. We're going to talk about being high and philosophy. Mostly philosophy, but a little bit about being high. Just a second. So, any children watching in the future, don't get high.
Don't do drugs.
Yet. Don't do
Drugs
drugs
are bad.
yet. I'm just kidding.
Well, moderation. If you do
Yeah,
do
moderation.
drugs, do it in moderation. I'll say that.
Exactly. And you know what? Nobody knows where we live, so that we could all be in legal states. How's that sound?
I'm not.
Me
I'll say it. I don't care.
either.
My state's pretty legal,
Yeah, your
You
your
dirty
state's
bitch.
liberal as fuck.
but the stuff I bought wasn't bought legally. If that helps.
There you go. Now you're talking. I robbed a lollipop on my way there, so I did something
Yeah.
illegal too.
Mhm. So I don't even know what I'm thinking, but
Well,
let's ask a really hard one first. You want to?
sure.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Yep. That's a tough one.
How dare you presume that this isn't what nothing looks like, my dude?
Okay. So then I'll say this, Dell, and I would love to hear your response. I've been dealing with certainty, as we all have been.
Yep.
What is a now I know many routes that perhaps I could chat GPT in my brain of what Delsu would say here. What do you think about this statement? Assuming that there's meaning in our language, maybe that's a presupposition that we could just start with. Fuck it. There is something. I am 100% absolutely certain, infallibly, dogma, that that is true. What would you say to that? Is there any chance that you could square the circle without actually squaring the circle? And because that was interesting what you said, how do you know that this isn't what nothing looks like, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know, what would you say to that absolute statement? Am I wrong for
Well,
putting my faith in that, or what?
wrong. I don't know if you're exactly wrong. I think the best actual critique I could give is to like ask what something even means in comparison to nothing at that point, because
Hmm.
you have because you're applying it in such a way that it has to be so vague that it can't apply to anything specific, because you might leave something out of the definition of something. And so, but you leave it so vague it becomes like trivial, and so you might as well call it not, like we're so far in the boundary of this term that it's like leaving it as undefined as possible. You end up with a lack of content in the word that
so
you're using.
linguistically, it's something is, nothing is not.
So this is a thing by definition then in that case. Dell, what if I said to that, I have my Yu-Gi-Oh deck card and I pull out, um, I just say something is anything that can be, and or let's see, everything that can be, and we use that definition. What if I said, could I? I guess yeah. I mean, it's ends up just being a tautology, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So there is something that's only true because of the because of the tautology that I just made. That something is everything that
The
can be.
definition of something is itself. You know what I mean? Like if you're just saying any random something, it's it's a physical matter. It's matter, space, energy, and time. Whereas like nothing is isn't.
None of that. It's none of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a better question then. Can I be absolutely certain about tautologies?
Well, yes, because a triangle having three sides is true by definition, because that is what we have defined it to be. So that is not only a metaphorical truth, but a metaphysical truth.
So,
It's
okay.
it's kind of like, how, what do you mean certain? Because if you have conflicting tautologies that both make sense and do work within their own like systems of thought,
Hmm.
I don't think it's right to call one true over another. Like if we take the assumptions that are in calculus and compare them to the ones in chemistry, they're going to be
You'll be
different
wrong.
assumptions, but
Yeah.
they're both doing their work and they're both a part of a system. So,
This is why I feel like I always resort to this maxim of mine, which is whoever you're talking to, whatever group of people, you have to be on the same page. You have to be in agreement. You have to compromise if there are some differing tautologies that both work somehow. And so I think there's calculus and chemistry would have to come to some compromise. They both work. It depends what they're doing, of course.
I mean, I would argue that calculus is used in measuring molecules and bonds and things like that. So, chemistry is basically mathematics. So is physics. So is pretty much other natural sciences fall down to. I mean, I would imagine that for the statistics of geology, I imagine a lot of math is probably involved. So,
I got it. Do I sound okay?
what would you think about that though?
Do I sound okay, by the way?
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You sound
Yeah,
fine.
I mean most mathematical domains, and you've said this before, Dal, where algebra and calculus and all geometry will all have differing assumptions under them. But won't these assumptions translate nicely from one domain to another? Or is it just so different in their assumptions
I would
that
answer
It,
for
calculus
Dow.
couldn't?
I would
Yeah,
answer for Dow and say that calculus requires algebra. You have to know the slope of a
I would think
line,
so.
y
Right.
equals mx plus b. You have to know that kind of stuff to do
yeah.
calculus. So it's based trigonometry,
It's like,
geometry, all involved with calculus, which is physics. Understanding physics.
like take calculus and what's it called? Relativity, just general relativity. You can do calculus in the like. I mean, you can do general relativity in calculus. Like you can use. I don't know the math, or else I could describe it better. But you can use calculus and math in it to describe a like fabric space time and do the same
Yes.
calculations. It takes a lot more work and it's like roundabout. It's a really weird thing to do in there, but
Are
I
they ever?
basically I don't think I think it's not that you're like taking the assumptions from one and putting them in another. It's more like you're achieving the same goal. Both of the other system does this thing, and you're seeing that from this other system and seeing if you can do that thing. And I think most time you can. Most time, any two systems, if they're complex enough, will be able to do most of the same stuff or similar stuff. Because it's also weird because there's like if you look at Stephen Wolfram's ruleal space, he has like a list of all possible rules that can underlie like a mathematical calculation or something, and
Hmm.
he expresses it in geometry, and they all will give up different shapes, but they're like infinitely non-repeating. Like they go on forever and they don't repeat, and they can come up with anything. And he's found calculus in there. He's found like all these types of math that we use. And so I kind of think it's like that. Like it's more like there's a landscape of different ways of thinking and types of math and different
Yeah.
assumptions. And
Well, Wolfram, he's basing everything on what he knows about math and saying that there's a computational model that works for the universe, the known universe.
yeah,
Um,
It sounds
so
like
maybe
what
so.
you're. It sounds like what you're describing, though, is that these different maths can help get the same answers. Is that what you were saying? It didn't. It didn't. Well, rather, it didn't sound like what you were saying was that these were incompatible.
Yeah, they're not exactly incompatible, but they're not exact. They don't do exactly the same thing all the time. Like there's like paraconsistent logics. Non-Euclidean geometry does something different than geometry. Like you do have systems that do different things and can't express things in the same way at the very least. And so it's definitely like I think there's a space worth exploring, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like a base 10 number system or a base 3. They have base 5s, I believe. I'm not sure. I'm not a
Well,
mathematician, but
let's bring it back to tautologies. I mean, are there ever going to be inconsistent? I mean, I asked the same question with assumptions. Are there ever going to be tautologies that are differing from each other? Because we're talking about certainty, also, by the way, and what certainty was. And it sounded like you saying that since there are different tautologies that both work, you can't say that they're not true, um, even though they may be incompatible with each other. That's what I kind of. And so, if we're going to take math, I just wonder if there's any tautologies that are incompatible with one another in regards to P is P, right? Um, can we be
There's
absolutely certain about tautologies?
there's I forgot the name of it. It's like fuzzy logic. It's one of the. It's in the realm of paraconsistent logic.
fuzzy logic is a deviant logic. It's which also paraconsistent is also a deviant logic. They're just odd logics. That's what deviant means. Um, but what was I saying? What was the first part again?
Fuzzy logic.
Fuzzy logic. Fuzzy logic is where it's on a spectrum, guys. It's like
Hmm.
0 to 1, but there's an entire spectrum in between 0 and 1, which would be like off and on. So fuzzy logic is weird, and I would imagine it works more on probabilities than like modality and stuff. You know
Hmm.
how that fits together. I don't remember everything about logic. I did a lot of study on this, and it has been smoked away. So,
Is P under the category of fuzzy logic?
um,
Law of
not as
identity?
far as I know. I mean, P is P would be under every form of like formal logic, non-deviant
Okay.
logics. P equals P
Ugh.
might be incorrect in like paraconsistent logic. You
I
could
hear
have
you.
I think
P equals not P.
I
So,
think paraconsistent logic specifically deals with non-contradiction and
oh yeah,
consistency.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then there's it's the like there's another like weird logic like fuzzy logic or something that I don't think it entirely does away with identity. It just like vagifies it. It's instead of P equals P, it's like P equals some spectrum wherein it can be anything from P to not P or something.
That's
It's
what
like
fuzzy logic would say. Paraconsistent logic would do exactly what you said about the law of non-contradiction, which is P equals not P. So P and not P in the law of non-contradiction cannot be true in the same way at the same time. So, like, I guess there's some metaphorical way to understand the law of non-contradiction to where there's maybe something in between that. I mean, I don't even know
couldn't couldn't
how
I
you would
just
come to that.
say oh well, P rather than P is P, P is some spectrum between P and not P. Wouldn't that not be the case then? Because those are now two different things. One is the P, and then the other is P plus something
Yeah,
plus.
it'd be like a function. You'd have P as the function, and then inside you'd have another P with the negative P.
But then let's say we take wherever it ended up on the spectrum, and in the first part we also move it so that they are the same now. We're back to P as P. Can I be absolutely certain about that? There's some concept here that I'm trying to point
By
out.
definition, by definition of how we have socially constructed logic, P is P. That's the definition of it.
And can we
That's the
be
definition of
absolutely
logic.
certain about definitionally bound things?
I
I mean,
guess
I
I
mean,
guess I guess I have my own answers now to that.
logic is as much a pattern in
it's like
mind independent reality as it is an abstract concept.
I think you can be absolutely certain as long as you play by the rules and as long as everyone plays by the rules. But
Yep,
the moment
that's
someone's not, then like certainty goes out the window. You have to negotiate something new or
that's
something.
literally the exact thought that just
I
came to
I
my head.
am almost, and I mean so goddamn close to certain that my phenomenological experience exists and something exists. So I
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
agree with Barry. I if somebody was holding a gun to my head, I'd be like, yes, I'm certain that I exist. Because for me to deny that would be, I mean, confusing.
I
I don't know
I
how
don't
I
even
don't even know
have
where that
that.
would start.
I don't even have that much faith to start bringing in the I
Yeah, I know.
and what the I and that's
Yeah,
why I
the
like to
self.
say
Yeah.
there is something because I wouldn't say I am something.
Well, it's argued that the self and identity are two of the same sides of the same coin. The self is the internalization. The personality is the externalization of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that plays out to other people in a social environment. So, see, I'm really stoned. Where the hell was I
Well,
going with that?
that's even fuzzy. That's fuzzy to me too. Where does my internal end and the external begin? I mean,
Yeah, good luck with that one.
yeah. Well, I think we tied a bow on that honestly, so we could probably go to something else now.
Yeah,
I
we'll
mean,
jump around.
Dal literally said the exact epiphany that I had just came to,
Yeah.
which is we can be absolutely certain if we play by the rules, but
Yeah,
once the rules start changing, then
yeah. I
so
mean, the rules of logic are social constructs that collectively have been made by people. So, yeah. Could be
what's
wrong. Could
next?
be wrong. Could be wrong about those patterns that we're seeing. That we relate the abstract concepts to. Um, so I don't know. I, of course, I've been looking into the scientific methodology recently. Obviously, I've also been looking into neuroimaging and trying to learn more about the brain in general. Just everything about the default mode network, the salience network, and the frontoparietal network. I believe is the three mode network. And it's interesting the faculties that they control. Um,
Such
it
as
just understanding all of that just plays a bit into determinism. So I was going to go into like questioning, getting behind our own neurons, uh,
if we could,
thinking about how you would do thinking if you
how
were actually doing it.
that's what free will is. It's just the practice of going as far meta as you can, and then wherever you stop is going to be proportional to the amount of free will that you have. But if you're constantly determined by your passions and instincts and you don't stop and think for a sec, you're not going to have that much freedom. Uh,
I think we have
if that's
will.
where you were going with
No, no,
determinism,
yeah,
of
you got
course.
it. You got it right. You got it right. I think we have will. I don't know if it's free. I'm more on the Schopenhauer side, not completely, but the we have intentionality, but our intentions when we make a choice, we're not aware of it as fast as it's processing in our brain. So is that a choice? Well, that's questionable. But intentionality is harder to question because we can prove to ourselves at least that we have intentionality. We can tell that to others and through behaviors and language.
It makes me
Um,
think of Nivik last night. How do you know that you're not lying to yourself about the fact that you
and then
know
he
you
said
have
he didn't
intention?
trust me, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "What does that have to do with anything?"
I want to do something with you too. If we are going to get into this conversation, what we need to do immediately is define what free will and or freedom is. Does anyone want to volunteer a quick
Oh,
a
jeez.
dirty and quick definition?
Um,
Go for it, Dell.
oh God. Free
Don't
free
don't
will.
don't 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 complexify it. Just
Don't
if
complexify.
we can add to the definition as we go on. We could even take what Thomas said, which is make choices, will. We brought up will. How about the definition, the ability to make choices? What should we add to that?
All right. Yeah, I'd say the ability to make choices if we're doing free will, maybe add something. I mean, personally, I always want to add something about like
Do it.
with an understanding of varying constraints. Like more free has less constraints than less free is what I would try to build into the definition. I don't
I
know how I
agree.
would say
I
that.
agree with that concept. We don't even need to, now that we've talked about it, we don't even need to add it to the conversation. We can just know that that concept exists, that the less constraints equals more freedom,
Yes.
right? Good. How about,
So
yeah,
I would
what do you want to
say,
add?
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
I would just say it's the ability to do otherwise. That would be what choice would be, but will is intentionality. Just inside internally of yourself, if that's what you want to say. That is that there is intentionality. Like
So let's add
I may
this.
have an intention to do so, but and here's the problem. Here's the problem with that. We can have this intuitional thing about what I just said, but technically that could also be determined. Like
Yes.
my ability to interpret my brain states in any sense or fashion or whatever could have been determined, and therefore my behavior is determined.
You've already bypassed stage one and gotten to stage two. For that reason, we can add that now to the definition. The ability to make choices with intent, and then we can now have at the suffix of this definition something about even these things could be determined. So we have that now implanted at
Mhm.
the end of our definition.
Mhm.
So the ability to make choices with intent, and then what I'll add, which is to say, to have a goal in mind, to have a purpose in mind, and be able to execute. There's the intention part, and then there's the physicality part.
Are there
Yes,
choices without goals?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
And this is good. Do we agree or disagree? And we'll talk about it. Why it's a necessity. It's necessary for there to be a goal or a purpose in mind when going about our free will, when being able to actualize free will. I think it has to be. Otherwise, I think you're being determined by external outside sources. Therefore, you're not free. But if you have the ability to have a goal in mind and then achieve and execute, that is going to determine how free you actually were in that scenario. If I want to make a spirally paperclip, I have the purpose, I have the motivation, the motive to do that, and I do it. It's kind of shitty, but it shows that I was free in being able to do that, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, even of course, the argument we've already gone through, but uh, yes, the ability to do otherwise is separate from intentionality. Do we agree with that?
the ability to be the ability to do otherwise. Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay. So I can have an intention of killing someone, but choose not to kill them.
yes.
Right. That
Uh,
could be determined. That whole scenario could be determined, and I'm in line with like people like Robert Sapolsky and things like that. Physical determinism with any choice, with any chance or choice that happens, could just be all deterministic. And we'll shelf that because you said right. We've already
Right.
gotten to the point.
Yeah, we're just.
But
I mean, have we defined free will? I think we've, or well, yeah, the goal. Just talk about why we may or may
oh
not
yeah,
need
the
a
goal.
goal
Well,
with
I'm
or
trying. I was
purpose.
trying when you said it a minute ago. I was trying to think of an example that might be non-goal oriented choice making.
Yes, let's hear it.
But if you are actually making a choice, if there's actually the ability to do otherwise, then I can't think of one that doesn't involve at least some small goal like um drinking a glass of water or
Getting up
knocking
to
it
take a
over on the
piss.
floor.
Yes, going to the bathroom. Your everyday. Yes. And if you were to do otherwise, I think that that means you're either determined to do otherwise, or you called an audible, right? And you created a different goal instead of killing the person. Okay, I'm not going to do that. I've reasoned myself intelligibly, rationally, and I now have a different purpose in mind that doesn't
Mm.
involve killing. And so I've done otherwise. Still, a goal is required, or you were determined by external, you were coerced, maybe you were whatever.
I would say causality determines all of that.
Yeah,
Um,
and likely there is no free will based on this.
yeah, based on what we know about
Yeah.
physics, there seems to
Even
not be.
even the goals that we end up creating, I think too are determined, but I think that it's necessary for free will. If free will means anything in the language games we play, I truly feel as though it has a lot to do with our ability to achieve a goal. That's how I see it used. There's always a goal in mind when we talk about free will, moral actions, the ability to do 10 pull-ups, whatever, however freedom and free will is used in language games, I always see that there is a goal. Necessarily there is a goal in mind.
Okay.
And if there's
Hmm.
not, then I don't think it's free will.
So the
But
ability to do otherwise with a goal in mind.
Feel
that's
like
good with intention.
I
Also
don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
with intention.
obviously you have to have the intention before you attempt to do
True.
the goal. But yes, all
The
of that in a
formal
row
definition.
is
Yeah.
pretty much how I see it abstractly as well.
Dal, what are your thoughts?
I don't even like the free will conversation because I feel like
I
such a
know.
cynic.
What?
I
Okay,
feel
go
like
ahead.
I'm like I mean, first of all, my first intuition is to question every rule that you guys agreed upon was just about questionable to me. Like,
Yeah, well,
um,
we need your
yeah, let me.
input then so that we can compromise.
What would it be? What was the one you just said? Yeah,
We were
I
talking about
missed them all.
goals.
Most of
Uh,
them.
we're
Oh yeah, goals. Does
the ability to have you have to have a
does
per. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
We
like
said
does
that the definition was intention, the ability to do otherwise, and a goal.
I mean, I feel like I should preface that I don't think freedom or free will or determinism, I don't think any of those terms actually apply to reality. And I think the perspective of reality is kind of the perspective you take on when you start wondering if whether or not it's true that we have free will or if our actions are determined.
Makes
So
sense.
I think because of that, it makes it hard for me to talk about the conversation. But going to
Do
the
you see any
specific,
constant? Do you see any constants in nature that might lead you to believe that there might be a hint of determinism?
uh, I don't know. See, I think constancy and its lack thereof are so intertwined with my biology that I cannot separate reality from just how my body's built and how perception works and how
Yeah,
I perceive time.
we can't escape our phenomenology. I think we can all understand and agree on that.
Yeah,
So,
and I
so Dale, what is the alternative then to this phenomenon that we're trying to describe that we believe to be pretty good, pretty well explained, I think. I mean, there are worse words that do worse at corresponding to what's going on, I think. This is why I was very careful to try and create a definition so that we could have some stable understanding on what we're trying to describe out in nature. So, what is your alternative that you think is better suited rather than these things like determinism or free? I mean, do you have an alternative to?
I
Yeah,
I kind of do. I basically think that we should split it up into different language games. Like I think determinism is a way you think about the world when you're looking at it through sets of axioms. Like if you're doing math about how long the shadow is going to be, you're going to assume the position of the sun at this time of day, and you're going to and everything's going to be causally connected. Like if you're doing math, if you're looking at it that way, everything's causally connected. If you're doing science, you're probably going to be thinking the same sort of way. You might leave out, you might have round cows or whatever, but you're still going to have causal connections. But in a social situation where you're good, just kind of going through your day to day, I think that's so far disconnected from the deterministic frame that
Oh, I
it
see. So the pragmatic answer that me and Perry come to a lot is who cares if it's a compatibilist or an incompatibilist framework? We have to act as though we do have the ability to do otherwise.
Yeah, I just think it's it. Like we should set like we shouldn't try to unify them. There should be like the social free will and the our scientific conception of reality's deterministic causal notions. I just don't think they have to entangle with one
So in
another.
some way, that's compatibilism. Would you disagree?
Yeah, that's I tend to call myself a compatibilist, but I also like I think the terms are so vague, and both of them, like
Well,
fate and freedom, are
s-
so baked
what
into
what
our
I'm what I mean by
culture.
what the hell did I just say? I forgot it because I was trying to listen to you and talk at the same time like an idiot. I'm sorry about that. What
It's,
did you
You
just
said
say?
some. You said compatibilism and incompatibilism. Dell said
Yeah.
he
yeah,
refers to
So
himself as both.
compatibilism is like it. It's hard compatibilism is like free will and determinism or indeterminism, which is randomness. Pretty much same thing as free will, I guess. But um, indeterminism and determinism can work with free will. Like it all fits together, it all works fine together. And obviously it does, or we wouldn't be doing anything. But
yeah.
Uh,
let me ask you a question. I know you're not necessarily a physicalist, so you don't have to take on those presuppositions. But do you think that whatever is happening with physics in I don't like to use this word, but in mind independent reality, whatever is happening with physics, do you think that that's been uniform since the Big Bang?
I mean, I honestly I have no idea. If I had to put money on it, oof.
The math says it is. I
Well, I
don't know.
don't know. I think it's an assumption we make, right? Like we assume it's been stable since the beginning of like the cosmological constant's been stable since the beginning of time.
I
And
think
that's part of the reason why we have
we assume
uh
that because there are no better alternatives. We've tried the
well,
alternatives and we haven't gotten
yeah,
a better one
to be
from
fair,
indeterminacy, pluralism, whatever you
well,
want.
I don't think there's going to be a plur because we're talking like cosmology. So I don't think that I
Yeah,
We're
we're
mean,
For
talking.
my
me, it was just
Yeah,
two of an infinite amount of alternatives that I picked out. And
well,
go ahead.
in the realm of cosmology, I think that we only have a certain amount of money and time we can put into anything. And the standard model was like kind of what came out of the sciences as we had them, over the past 200-300 years. And the since Newtonian physics, and then later Einstein changed it up with some other stuff, and around the same time they did
he just found a new way that
quantum.
gravity worked. That was and it
Well,
changed a lot of the.
it was a big one because it allowed us to predict like
Yeah,
all the planets, not just
yeah.
most
Well,
of
it
them.
allowed us to predict like huge cosmic events and shit, which is
Yeah.
pretty big.
And then with quantum physics coming out around the same time as Einstein came out with his stuff, uh, and it
Somewhere
having,
around the same time, about 30, 40 years before he started doing his thing. But yes,
yeah, yeah, Einstein showed up like a maverick and blew it up. Those
he
guys
did.
were
He
in
did. I
the
mean,
trenches doing the.
people like Niels Bohr and Max Planck and stuff like that. They were doing that stuff probably around this maybe the same time as Einstein. I'd have to look that up, but
I
Einstein
think they
figured
were a
out
little
shit like
before.
1915 or some shit. I can't remember, but
I hate to sound like a broken record, but I don't think that I've heard you give an alternative to what may better explain these phenomenons that we experience, such as gravity, causal relations. It seems like determinism, at least in the scientific, yes, we have these axioms, as does anything that you can intelligibly talk about, I believe. It just doesn't seem like there's been a better alternative than the ones that we've been using and that we've been tacking on and evolving and changing,
Yeah, I,
strengthening.
I guess I would duck my need to give an alter because I'm not knocking anything down.
That's
I'm
fine.
not saying that
Fine.
determinism is wrong. I'm saying it's a different reference frame. Like you're coming at it from the perspective that these systems that we use to talk about reality are somewhat synonymous with the reality beyond our experience. But it could very well be us building a system that has some predictive power that we use to judge whatever's happening and coming to us. It might not be built into reality itself. I guess I think there's a
It
line
says
between.
right here on Wikipedia on causality, causation is usually interpreted deterministically, meaning that a cause always brings about its effect. This view is rejected by probabilistic theories, which claim that the cause merely increases the probability that the effect occurs.
All right. Because of David Hume, you can't predict the future. We don't know if the future will resemble the past, but we could be
Yep.
more confident and the probability goes up
Which
as
I was
time goes on.
literally about to read. That's so
Mhm.
funny that you said that. The regularity theory of causation, inspired by David Hume's philosophy, states that causation is nothing but a constant conjunction in which the mind apprehends that one phenomenon, like putting your hand on the fire, is always followed by another phenomenon, like feeling of pain. According to nomic means physical. According to physical regularity theories, the regularities take the forms of the laws of nature studied by science. So,
So, you know, and you could play that card where, Hume got you. You can't predict the future. But, his argument just gets weaker as time goes on, and I've yet to see a better alternative. If you don't have an alternative, that's fine. That's, I there's nothing wrong with that. It just, we can go next, I guess, because there's no more. But I don't know
Yeah,
how the conversation can continue from there. To say
I
the
think
blunt.
the alternative is just to recognize that they're different. It's like trying to do.
Good.
Yeah,
So
it's just
we
you're trying to do math in cinematography.
let's do this then. Let's talk about how they're different. In what ways do you think, significant ways, um, are they different? And what are we contrasting right now? Determinism with
Like
some with
free
free
will
will,
or
freedom. Okay.
yeah,
So, okay. So, do you think that these are not like non-vacuous contrasts? Do you think that they can differ in some ways, but also be similar or just irrelevant? Is that what you're saying? Like, there's certain instances in our language games that we play where these two things just don't. They're not sufficient or relevant. They just don't apply to this scenario. Is that kind of
well,
in some other language must be used, something like that?
yeah, because like I don't think you can make a predictive system based on a lack of constraints. Like that doesn't make any sense. You can't make uh, math based around no axioms. I'm
yeah, that would be indeterminism, where everything is randomized. And J.H. Baker, or I can't remember the guy. He said, if determinism's true, there's no free will, and if indeterminism's true, everything's random. There's no free will.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
everything being random is not what we well. Like I know a lot of free will people go on that. I think they're all wrong too. Like randomness doesn't help you at all either.
Can you
It's
say that
Right
again?
now, as far as we know in science, which I know is not necessarily the framework we're arguing within, but in science, I forgot what I was fucking saying. Welcome, guys, to Stone Philosophy.
Dal,
Hope you're enjoying yourself.
can you
What the
say
hell
that
was I saying? Seriously, I thought I had a good point there.
oh man,
you were saying something about indeterminism and determinism, um, randomness. We don't have free will in
Yeah,
either case. Um,
well, it's gone now. Fuck it.
Dale, can you say that thing again? Well, you said something about constraints.
you can't there you won't be able to make a predictive system with zero constraints. Like you can't make algebra with no axioms. I think there's one thing I've seen. I think it's a gunk theory thing, which is I still haven't understood gunk theory. It's another one of those kind of logic systems but someone sent me a paper about gunk theory based ontology,
Okay.
which has no ground somehow.
Let
So
me pause you real quick
I haven't
before we get
figured
to
that out, but that might be relevant.
okay, it may be relevant. Let me pause you real quick. Is it possible that we may need to change our definition then of free will? Which is why I tried to do this earlier, and we have this concept on the side, like we said, where the less constraints equals more freedom, right?
Yeah, but
How sure are
how,
we that that's necessary in order to represent in a definition what free will is?
well, here the thing about less constraints is like less than what? Like like yeah, there's constraints, but the thing doesn't say zero constraints equals free will. It says less. So
Right.
less than infinity, less than what? There's always going to be a degree of freedom. There's always going to be a degree of a lack of freedom, just because. I mean, maybe just because of the way we conceive of things, like just because we conceive of there being rules and
Sure. Meaning,
universals or whatever.
yeah, but it seems like you're going down that road again of where there's just no meaning and that we can't use these predictive schemas or our language that we use to predict things because it might just be gibberish in this quantum plena or plenum.
No,
Is it?
I
Yes,
think
that's
we
correct.
Yeah.
I think we can totally use them. I don't think that that the truth value you receive from any of these systems goes beyond these systems. You're not going like you won't. It's what Gödel's. It's kind of related to Gödel's theory, but I don't think it's actually the conclusion. It's just like a system can't prove all of its own axioms.
Yeah, I mean, girdles
Maybe
incompleteness is super important to remember. Is that basically stops any formal system from absolutely proving its axioms, right?
So,
yeah. So
but does that? But that's for everything that we ever talk about.
yeah,
Is that
and
going to be
that's
the use
why
card for every? I mean, how are we ever going to get anywhere if we just play that game where I can't define the word by and then all of the words that are in that definition and then all of those words.
we don't need a hegemony of like a idea that's like top of the totem pole. We don't need an idea hegemony or what however you pronounce that.
I
It's
don't think
basically what I'm
I don't
saying.
think we need that either.
So
Well, like
you don't want
because
to
if
hold
you
science. You are you saying that you don't want to hold science and other things like that over
Right.
other
I don't like
ideas?
appealing to authority.
I don't want like I do have to be careful here because I do like the effect. Like obviously, if you can cure cancer, go with the thing that's been shown to cure
Sure.
cancer.
Of course. There's meaning and axioms behind that.
We know
But
you
I
understand empiricism.
yeah
We know,
yeah.
we know you get it.
I'm
So
just clarifying for the we have a live audience, so I want to
We
make
do.
sure
We
that
do.
so
they don't think I'm saying don't cure cancer because for the love of God, cure the can't. Go to your doctor, talk to your doctor.
Yep.
So when do
But
we accept certain axioms like the cancer saving ones, and when do we not accept the other ones when it comes to things like determinism and free will?
it's totally pragmatic. So you're going to accept these axioms based on what your goals are, what you want to do. So if you're doing science, use the axioms science, whatever field of science uses to get the work done. And then when you go home, you don't have to wonder if the sandwich you ate today will cause you to act in a way that nurtures the relationship with you and your wife. That's like not how anyone thinks about that. You just go home, you make choices, you make decisions, you act in accordance with your, well, some people call it free will, some people call it will, whatever you want to
We
call
can
it.
look in the brain and show all these things firing and lighting up, and like the coming home, the husband and wife thing that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But surely there's pragmatic utility to using these words, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, could we? I mean, yeah, we're talking about it. We're communicating. The doctor can talk to the patient, but the patient doesn't need to be a determinist, I guess. And the doctor might
That's an
need to be to
example. That's an
find the
example
medicine.
of that's an example of one where determinism isn't useful. I'm talking about the ones where they are useful.
Yeah, like if you're doing math and someone comes in and they're like, "Hey, I have this undeterministic math system where you just write down random number." Yeah, that guy is not doing math. Just don't pay attention to him. If he does come up with something that works, wow, good for that guy. Give him money. But until then, let's not care about it because
So
we're
Yeah.
take
here. We're waiting
until
for stuff that works.
until it's been shown to the mathematical community at large and it's been added into the data set and it's been mathematically proven as a useful formula, that's when it matters.
so Dal, this means then, if that's your conclusion, that there are certain axioms that we can use to get meaning, which is gotten through pragmatic utility by using the word determinism or freedom or free will. So, shouldn't we work within that scope when we're trying to get to stage two of what free will actually is? Wouldn't you agree that there are then some axioms that we need to provide an alternative, then, right?
Wait,
There
what?
are,
Say that again. I
sure,
think you lost me.
sure. I asked you, there are axioms that can save cancer, and there are axioms that aren't needed and pragmatically useful
For
you,
saving cancer, yeah.
for saving. But then you gave an example of determinism and freedom and or free will having pragmatic utility as well. Therefore, that means that there are certain axioms that are meaningful and useful, and not the Gödel's incompleteness theorem issue that we use. Similarly, how we use the cancer saving axioms.
Yeah.
But it seemed like you weren't able to give an alternative when I asked you earlier, and you don't like using these words. Wouldn't it make more sense to work within the realm of those axioms that are useful, such as the example that you gave, when we're talking about determinism or free will?
Yeah, I think the reason why I don't want to give examples is because the question is kind of asking about reality beyond our phenomenal experience, beyond what we. It's like asking stuff about base reality.
Yeah, it's like asking about the noumena. How the hell do you ask about it? I
I
got you.
disagree. I disagree. I just dropped that lighter. I can phenomenally explain that in phenomenological terms using the word determinism. I've done it 100 times in my life,
Yeah,
talking
sure,
about
but you can
causality.
do like you can say that like what I've been saying the whole time, where our scientific systems that map these things out deterministically are also a part of our phenom. Like you can trap determinism in phenomenology and shove free will out into the universe, or you can have free will trapped to our phenomenology and shove
The
determinism out into the
I don't necessarily disagree. I think if you tie things to the what's the best way to say this? If you um if you fuck man.
If you tie free will and determinism together,
Yeah, that's
in
what
your
I'm
system.
getting at, but I'm trying to phrase something a certain way and I just can't think of the
But
goddamn
we
words.
we've already gotten we haven't done our due diligence on getting the definition of what free will even is yet. We're having these qualms
No.
about how to use these axioms, and it seems like we're
well,
already trying to argue that you have to have determinism internally and throw free will out in the universe,
The,
or vice versa.
Well,
no,
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 I'm
the
just
only
trying to.
big thing we got to remember, and this is the biggest argument for free will, in my opinion, is that we could be, since science is socially constructed, what we know about science and what we understand about our models, we could be drastically wrong about physics, and they could have changed since the Big Bang. That would still be some kind of causation, I would guess,
We're, we're but we're
but
doing it again. We're arguing for free will or determinism.
right.
I think we're still on the stage. I was trying to get Dell to answer something within the stage and the realm of this definition before we get. Am I wrong about that, or
No, you're
because
fine.
okay,
You mean the definition of less
using
constraints being
yeah,
more
because well,
freedom?
you said that you had a problem with our definitions of intention, the ability to do otherwise, and a purpose in mind, and then your argument was revolved around these axioms, Gödel's
Uh,
incompleteness theorem.
I
And
think the
I'm trying to shift you to look at the pragmatic examples that you gave, because you admitted those are the axioms that you would use, such as the cancer saving axioms. And I want you
well, I
to
would use them to cure cancer. I wouldn't use them to make coffee.
I'm not I'm not saying that you're using the same axioms as the cancer saving ones to make coffee. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Hmm.
I just mean like
How do I say this?
because I'm trying to like open it up and make like in my mind it's a world where there's determinate there's it's a world of different logical systems where there's ideas of determinism and there's ideas of free will just like littered throughout this like social landscape of ideas. And I don't think that within the social landscape that there's a peak with an idea that is like touching the sky. It's like going past
Doesn't
our
have to be.
phenomenology. And so to say that like determinism or free will are true, it's like where in this landscape of thought? Like
We're
I could say
I'm
yes to
trying to
either or
I'm
neither.
trying to get it out of you. I'm trying to get where that truth is. We need to have meaning within our axioms that we end up creating. This is why I've been so gentle
Meaning.
of trying to create this definition that we could use. We got to play by the rules, as you said earlier, right? And you're giving me mixed. It doesn't have to be the peak on this social landscape. It has to be sufficiently pragmatic. That's all. And there are many cases where it certainly is
Yeah.
sufficiently pragmatic to use words such as free will, determinism. And I want to create a working definition that we can use and discover truth or not within this sufficient and necessary definition. But you had issues with intention, uh, the ability to do otherwise, and a goal in mind. And if you do, let's hear the alternative, is all I'm asking for. What's the better alternative definition that we can now use in
Better
order
for what?
to seek for truth? For the goal, as you said,
He's saying there may be
Well,
a different utility. Is that what you're saying, Dell?
yeah, I'm saying the landscape of ideas is full of multiple places with different goals. So if your goal is to seek truth, you're already ignoring a certain portion of the landscape of
it
ideas
doesn't
that are
have to
out
be.
there.
I just said that because you mentioned truth, and we can change our goals. I think we have to have a goal in mind. It's all
So,
common, and we all have to come to a compromise. But you have to give an alternative, is what I'm asking.
so I guess the alternative that I'm giving is this landscape where there are multiple systems with different goals all reaching towards different things. Some of them seeing the world as deterministic, some of them seeing it as non deterministic. And that's the actual state of affairs
This
that's
is an
going on.
alternative definition for free will.
Oh no, this is an alternative explanation for what's going on instead of free will or determinism. What the
I see.
whole to me
Okay.
the whole thing is a part of us. It's like a part of a social slash logical system we've made that describes the world, but it doesn't actually reach the so
So
like
it's just us in these multiple systems parsing up things the way that we want to and calling
yeah
that true.
yeah pretty
Good.
much.
Okay.
So good. So can we then say something along the lines of free will is this? Well, do you even accept that we should use a definition for free will or determinism, since you don't even think that these words are accurately describing the phenomenon that you think is actually happening independently
Yeah,
of
I
our
get
minds?
I guess if we're playing it at this level, we would have to give a definition that denote that like points at all the different definitions, basically. So
Is
we'd
that
have to like,
feasible or possible?
I mean, not for us, but like a dictionary.
This is
A
this
dictionary
is
would be
see,
nicer.
and that that is great and all, and I think that that is a very high-minded thought to come to as an individual human on this earth, and I truly, you are admirable. I will give you that. I truly admire you and your thought, but I don't know what we can do with that. When I say, so can we do that? Can we incorporate all of these things on the social landscape in the definition? You said, yeah, maybe for a dictionary. How do we get anywhere? How do we put your
We'd look it up in the dictionary or pick a definition from a dictionary to use to get through the conversation, or we'd use one of our personal definitions and
yeah,
just
so
go with that.
that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get to an interpersonal
All
conversation
right. So if we
or
come down
with
from the
our
layer, you want
definition.
like my personal,
I want
how
the
I parse
I
things?
want your alternative definition to whatever we've been
Yeah.
saying that we can use as a working definition as we talk about determinism and free will.
So basically, Dow, what would you? I mean, technically, if you said anything else besides determinism, you're still talking about something like determinism. But is there another phrase you would like to use other than just the linked social systems?
So if I'm coming up with a definition for free will, it's probably going to be like, uh, well, or freedom, I guess, is just like a lacking of constraints or less constraints than maximal, or something to that
Hmm.
effect.
So
Probably like,
non-maximally constrained in some way.
yeah,
Do you have to have intention in order to have free will, or can I just be an automaton that has less and less constraints and that makes me
um,
more and more free?
yeah, I would say you can be an automaton with like a ball rolling down a hill has a certain amount of freedom. An atom bouncing between other atoms in a quantum area
Ooh,
has a certain amount of
Well,
freedom.
freedom and free will.
we do know we do know that there is a fundamental there we think at least right now that there is some fundamental randomness to quantum mechanics, but it's still within like a deterministic probability of like 14 decimal places, so it's pretty goddamn accurate, you know what I mean? um, but
But it's
yeah,
accurate on very small systems. The larger the
yes,
quantum system we're looking at, the harder it is to nail
yes,
down that.
agreed, yeah, you're gonna the smaller you go, the more you're gonna have problems with measuring momentum and position simultaneously. So that may be another argument for free will, but I don't think it's a great one because technically, the quantum world, even though it's a constant changing process, would be determined. Just like because it's, I mean, it's just fields and forces. It's not like there's anything going. I wouldn't think that there would be anything random, and that's just my assumption. It's not like don't take me at my
It
word
I
sounds
for
like
that.
you
mean,
guys are talking about freedom though, which
Freedom.
I
I don't know how to define freedom, so I'm
which
gonna
I
let Dow
think
do
is
that one.
different than free will. It seems like the less constraints thing would be more used in a language game as the word freedom, degrees of freedom as you put it. But
yeah,
when we add will, as Thomas defined earlier is intent, intentions, I think free intentions is what the conversation is more about, at
yeah.
least in regards with determinism. So what is your definition for free will then? To
So, intent. I think intention is fine. I would just have to leave a door open because I think if you lack intention, I think just like sitting there isn't the only thing you can do with a lack of intention. Like I think if you have no intention, you can still roll down a hill. You can sit there. You can
Well, I mean, even to
wander
meditate is an
aimlessly.
intention, right? I mean, even
right.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you're intending to meditate, but I think not non-intention is gonna might look like meditating, but it's gonna be something different.
what about laying on the ground?
Yeah, or
That's
laying on the.
that's
But
intent.
even that is doing it. Why would you lay rather than on your back rather than
Yeah,
on your stomach? Or
intentionality. So there's a will there that I think is tied to some kind of intention.
but it's like if the ball rolls down a hill, why did the ball roll this slight variation rather than this slight or the
Quantum
plinko? You put
mechanics.
plinko,
So so here,
yeah, quantum mechanics.
ball. the difference in your analogy and why your analogy is wrong is that the ball doesn't have free will. I have the free will to intend to do something. I don't think. Can you give me an example of just to give me another one of those examples of having free will? Free will, not, something else. Free will without using intention.
Oh, that's hard.
You
Free.
said one of them, right? Didn't you say one of them,
Well,
like
I
meditating
mean,
or
just
something?
thinking of a person without any intention.
I don't think it's free. I don't think they have free will.
Well, it's like imagine like a guy standing in the room. Why is he standing? Why is he continuing to do what he was doing when he lost his intention?
How do you
Like
know
what?
what made him lose his intention?
Well, let's just say he was like making coffee or whatever. He looks off in the distance, and then us, the demons from an extra dimension, just plop out all of his intention, and he's just like staring outside. Would he continue staring outside?
See, and this is where we are almost forced to talk about determinism because I don't think he's free in that case. He was determined. He was externally, something external to his will caused him to
Well,
stare off in the distance or to
I
daydream.
guess I almost think that that's like begging the question because we're at we're like the whole meta or was this hypothetical scenario is like about figuring out whether or not free will requires intention, and so to
Right, and that hypothetical that you laid out, I don't think is analogous to free will. I think that that's a more analogous to determinism. Does that make sense?
yeah, but I mean, so of but yeah, because we're talking about the definition. So you
Of free
define
will
it.
for
Yeah,
free
you
will.
define free will as having intention. So of course, if we remove the intention from the guy, you would say he lacks
Yes,
will,
exactly.
and that would be part of it. But if the whole point of me saying he still has free will because he can, my point being that he can still make different choice. Like he's not even if he did stare out the window continuously after that, that would be a decision he's making. What parameters would be a part of his decision? Well, I don't think he loses any what degrees of freedom from his lack of intention. I think he
I disagree.
loses a goal. He loses the desire to go down certain ones, but that doesn't mean he won't go. Like that doesn't get rid of his freedom of choice. And that's what I think we mean in free will is like a freedom to choose between actions.
It sounds like that guy has the potential to have free will when he's not there actually doing anything in regards to intentions. So, same thing when uh, I think daydreaming and then realizing that you're daydreaming is a good analogy. You have the potential of, and again, I think it comes back to determinism. I don't know what to say because there's no uncaused cause in all of this, of course.
If we could prove causality incorrect, then maybe we might get somewhere. But I don't know how we're going to do that.
I
I mean,
think
I could
that,
just blur the
yeah,
lines. There's no beginning or end. It's just like a blurry motion forward.
Could be the.
Causality is
I
like
mean, sure, yeah.
I think that's who's that guy no one understands? Hegel. I think that's a Hegel thing where he says everything's a constant blur in motion or
Mm-hmm.
something.
I yeah, but I don't know if that hurts or helps determinism though. I mean, just saying that everything is a blur forward, uh, I think could easily still be compatible and consistent within most usages of determinism.
I'm fine with an infinite causal chain, but some
I
people.
mean, yeah, if you're gonna be, I see. I just think that It's all I mean, I could call it a language game, but it's like to use a word that is not already taken, to use a phrase that's not already taken. It's a mind game. The whole free will determinism debate. Yeah, you can make anything make sense with free will and make anything make sense with determinism if you just push it far enough. because it's like a word game, it's a mind game, it's ontology, it's literally just an ontological assumption at base reality beyond what we can conceive of, where it's like
You're
you're
doing it
either
again,
assuming
though.
it's total freedom or it's totally God's will or whatever.
I'm gonna call you a compatible dualist.
I'm like a compatibilist in the sense that I think it's all bullshit at the same time.
And but you're doing this thing again where you're just calling bullshit and you're being skeptical about everything. This is why one of my projects is to marry language games with analytic philosophy, with Socrates, with getting the essential definition. Marry these two things, compromise, synthesize, homage to Hegel, as you mentioned, and come to a rational compromise on how to use this word. It sounds like what I really think is it's just all bullshit. Uh, where do we, what? It's such a rocky and sandy foundation to try and discover anything. I
What
think I think we aren't coming to this compromise.
I think
it's like
Dal. I, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just kind of want to give my opinion on how your take is. You don't want to commit to any type of ontology, nor do you want to commit to any type of truth gathering methodology. Is that correct?
I don't want to limit my like I think that there's pros and cons to all of them, and that none of them are. I think they're all machinations of the human mind, and we should use them
I
as tools.
agree.
All right,
I
Patrick.
agree that there is a counter argument to every stance in philosophy and science. I agree with that. And what was the second thing you said?
That they're all machinations of the mind, like Patrick Starr
Yeah,
says.
Yeah,
machinations of the mind.
yeah. Well,
But
But so where do we go from? I mean, how can I use what you just said? And
so basically, instead of searching for an essential definition, you should recognize that system of trying to concretize our language games or whatever as like a forge. You're forging new tools
that's
out of
exactly
the
what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to
yeah,
marry these two. It's not just language games, and it's not just essential definitions. It's both. It's the
yeah, but
forge. Exactly. Yeah.
I think you have like the essentialness is the thing is like the what is that shit called that comes out of the iron? You like bend the iron over and over again, and all the little rocky bits come out that aren't the metal.
oh, uh,
Whatever that shit called. Keep it in the metaphor. But it's
flack,
like
I don't know.
yeah, flack or something. It's like the flack that
something like
comes
that.
off, or the soot that comes off that you wipe off the blade. Because the essentialism is the thing that I think we've been doing wrong the whole time. The idea that it's bigotry. It's like it's the definitional bigotry. The idea that my idea is somehow superior or more true than this other idea, without
That's just that's
without any, because it's an ontological claim, so there's no way to support one over the other. You have to get into like
that's
meta ontology, which
that's
is
not
just
my
like
position
Well,
though.
when we assume, I'm sorry, Perry.
Let me just
no,
say this. Let me just say this. The flack, by the way, is the ambiguity that we shred off, and the steel sword is the essentialism that is gotten not by saying that my idea is superior to yours. That's a straw man in my position. The essentialism is the combination of all parties in a compromise where no one is superior to anyone. It's the
yeah, but
idea in the compromise itself that is superior to anything. It is the steel.
I
And the
guess
ambiguity is what we don't want that shit.
my fear is that the same thing will happen that what was that called? Christians did it where they would like take other people's ideas and like use it to argue against them. They'd argue there's like it's like universalism or
Universal,
perennialism.
yeah,
It's more like
universalism is the idea that all religions point to the same similar truth.
yeah, or perennialism. So it's like the problem with uniting everything into one sword is that it becomes the sword that's stronger than all the other swords. And so it's like the
Disagree.
people with, I mean, it's more like I would caution you, I guess. That's my
Fair,
big,
fair enough.
because every time it's happened in the past, at least that I see when I'm looking at stuff, it seems like
Yeah, but
some people think they're doing good and that they're illuminating or helping these people or helping them see the truth or coming up with an essential thing that will actually work, and they end up
You have
like oppressing
if we if
someone
we
or
if we assume physicalism though, and I'm not saying we have to as an ontology, we assume those axioms within physicalism that we've talked about before. Um, that's how we have the ability to literally talk right now. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
pragmatics is going to force me to
But,
be empirical.
I
um,
mean,
to be essential, you have to be rational. It's not rational to make your sword bigger than everyone else's so that you can gatekeep and control everything. It's rationalism sorts itself out.
I mean, I'm with you in spirit. I'm just very scared. Like I would join your venture or whatever and be with you.
What's the alternative, my
I'm
friend?
just gonna be I'm gonna be the like Socrates who's gonna be constantly questioning everyone there and being like why the fuck are
Socrates gave an alternative. Everyone thinks that being eternally skeptical, that's half of philosophy. That's the first half, the really questioning. But the other half is coming to, we go to stage two. We progress. We go up. We go up the divided line towards the realm of the forms because Socrates gives an alternative. And if you're just going to say, oh, well, this could happen, then we could talk about the realm of possibilities all day, right? We talk with Nivik. We know how to do this. All he does is talk within the realm of possibilities. But is there some alternative that Socrates, can you give us what's all this business about educating women and the bronze and the gold and the silver? Well, I'll tell you. And he tells us rationally, morally. That's
yeah.
what Socrates does.
And what have I left something out?
Well,
He just just
yeah,
he wants an alternative to talking about the very idea of freedom or will or free
so that we
will.
could
Uh,
progress up the
it doesn't
divided
have
line.
any objective truth value. It's like color. What color is base reality? It's the same sort of question. Is reality free? Have free, like is reality free or determined? What color is it? Is it red or green?
I
It's the same
disagree.
question.
I
Reality.
think that that's a confused. I at least based on my experiences, how I see the word free will and determinism used in language games is much different
Yeah,
than
no, it's
what color
used.
is.
That's why
That's why we
I'm
marry language games with essentialism.
well. I
We
mean, no, that's why
progress.
I'm like so cautious in this conversation because I don't think there's an essential nature to it. I think it's literally
Then we can't
um,
progress. If I don't believe that we could progress if you don't think that
well, I
there's
think we can because I think the idea that there is no essential nature is a sword. That's the sword you forge. You'd be like, oh, there are no unicorns. Unicorns don't exist. That's a possible
yeah, and then
conclusion.
you start saying gravity doesn't exist, and you say determinism doesn't
Which
exist, and free
we
will
No,
don't
doesn't
he was
have.
he was just giving an example, Perry, about the unicorn.
I know.
Yeah,
I get
like
it, but okay.
Go ahead and reframe it, Dal.
I mean, like unicorns are fictional. That'd be a better way to say it. So instead of saying gravity doesn't exist, you'd say gravity is this description we have of things that happen to us in the realm of experience.
And
And
where
then
does that
you,
get
Well,
us in
well,
the
here's the
conversation?
thing, though. The
Hold on.
9.8 meters per second squared is happening regardless of what you think about it, right?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Where does
The
that
Okay.
get us,
the
Dal?
cure cancer axioms cure cancer.
Right. I got
Yes.
that. Yeah. Right.
Um, but
Where do you
that
think
gets
that
us
that gets
to
us?
a new frame where we don't bludgeon other people. Like there's a we live in a world where people have ideas of how the world works that are different only linguistically, and then they will spend so much effort and time bludgeoning each other with these ideas that won't like move anyone anywhere because they have different presuppositions and it's a different language game playing by different rules. And that's and like for I said what I
Yeah,
say in
those
text chat,
ones
free
don't move
will.
us. The ones that move us are the ones that people agree on and come to an agreement. That's what moves this world and what gives change, which gives us technology, cancer curing stuff. That's the essential part that I'm looking for. That's the alternative that I think most rational people, when they really think about it, they will want to abide. I mean, your sword is great, but it only goes for so long. It only gets us so far, I think.
So there are some people who are depressed as determinists, right? They
If,
become like suicidal.
if this is going to
Like,
be like a therapy thing on a way to think, yes, you could be therapeutic with these kind of
well,
quietists, right?
that's the sort of stuff I'm talking about. Is like the reason why we don't need the one essentialist sword is because pragmatic value doesn't come from one singular source. It comes from all over. And so we shouldn't hold one sword as the sharpest, or maybe we can. Maybe this
No
one's the
one's no,
sharpest.
yeah.
This
Well,
one's the shiniest.
why are you assuming that the therapeutic quietist position can't be a part of the essential project pragmatic journey that
That's an
we're
Because
interesting
looking
question.
for?
so yeah, if you leave room in your determine,
Plenty of room for
if your
rational minds.
sword is determinist and free will has both,
Yeah, of
then
course.
like
Why not?
yeah. But the thing is though is that that further concept is not going to be a free will determinist concept, which makes me happy anyway because that's what I'm saying is that the whole free will determinism divide is the problem.
I
Like
said
that's
Dude,
from the
here,
the
let me ask this
beginning
question.
that
Let me
free
ask this
will
question.
and
Let me
I
ask this
said
question
from the
real quick.
beginning that free will and determinism doesn't need to be non-vacuous contrast from each other. I
Yeah,
thought we
that's
established
kind
that.
of what
good,
I was
good,
gonna
good.
ask. That's kind of what I was gonna add. Just real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize for that. I got really excited.
Go ahead.
Are determinism and free will the same thing?
No. Or you were asking Dale probably, no
Yeah,
doubt.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are they the same thing? I mean,
Like, are we just
yeah,
looking at
kind
are
of.
we just looking at a different tapestry of the same thing,
Yeah, it's the
basically?
same object looked through a different lens.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's two different words trying to explain the same thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Okay.
Okay.
And that the difference between them is entirely from point of view, and we need some other concept that
No,
can bridge the
I
gap. You're
I
not going
agree.
to bridge it with what we have.
Well,
I mean,
we
we
need
could
to
make
come
up a word,
So
but what would that do for us?
we come up with an alternative. We make up a word.
yeah,
Exactly. We don't just
you're
sit here and say, "Oh, well, we don't have this, we can't do that X, Y, and Z." I think we should be less more open to the other, you get it.
yeah. I would like to be more open. I think a big reason why I have trouble with the word essentialism just because I have problems with the essentialist position more than anything.
I don't even
But
What is
I
the
agree.
big
I agree
Perry?
with your
I
goal. I
don't even
agree
know
with what
what
you're
Perry,
saying.
essentialism
Perry,
is as a movement. I'm just using
Fair
it
enough.
as
Fair
I
enough.
colloquially know the word
right?
Yeah,
essential and
fair enough.
Let,
meaningful.
let's ask this question real quick, Perry. What is the difference between how SPA saw determinism and how we might see determinism in 50 years, or how
Every
we see it right now?
everything from a different culture, a different time, a different geography, like Socrates and them had 2,500 years ago, is going to influence the ideas of theirs and the language that they use to describe those ideas. There's a plurality of overlapping perspectives that overlap. And that's what I mean by essential,
That's
is
kind
that
of what I was
those
meaning by
points.
tapestry a moment ago when I was
Yeah.
trying to steelman Dow.
Yeah.
But
I
what do
like
you
that.
what is the specific disagreement on what he just said, Dow?
I don't think we disagree really. I
I
think it
think Dale
was
was worried
words.
that I was dichotomizing free will and determinism.
Uh,
When I said from the very beginning that's where I jumped off this conversation. I wanted to know where they're different and where they're the same, because you made that clear that free will isn't necessarily opposed and the antithesis to determinism.
Yeah, I think I heard the word essentialism, and I was just like
You know what you need to do, Dal?
triggered.
I don't even know what essentialism is. I guess I'll look it up and see if it's consistent with my views or
We're,
not.
we're all taking we're all taking a hit. Everybody's taking a hit.
Yeah, go take a
Essen-
hit too. I'm
Essentialism.
getting water first.
Essentialism is the view that objects have a set of attributes that are necessary to their identity.
Explain what a
Essentialism.
physical object is to the uh, room, please.
What?
Like what an object is. Would you
Uh,
explain that to the crowd? Is all I'm asking you.
would I? Oh, would I explain what an object is?
Yeah.
To
What do we consider an object? Do we consider it physical? Do we consider it an abstract concept?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I would. No, I would say that even usually when this comes up, I say even imaginative processes are things,
I
ontologically
agree.
speaking. Ontologically
I
speaking.
think any abstract mental construct is a firing in our brain, which is a thing, right?
And it's going to have some corresponding of a lot of moving parts, some
Right.
change in the physical fabric of the universe is going to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe it's immaterial. Maybe there is material that we don't know, and our consciousness is
I
uh,
mean, that's possible.
giving off a byproduct that we just can't sense yet.
Possible.
But
I mean,
so the view that objects have a set of attributes that are necessary to their identity. No, I'm much
say
more
that
of a
essentialism one more time for the
yep.
crowd.
Essentialism is the view that objects have a set of attributes that are necessary to their identity.
Right.
I would
So
take the language games portion
yeah,
of this.
this deals with universals and particulars also, which I won't get too far into because we will have a metaphysics episode. Um, it almost sounds like we're thinking about a Platonistic ontology of truth when we're talking to Tao. And um, how could we ever prove that ontology wrong? I don't think we could. Uh,
That's a good question.
but of course, you and I always come back to the pragmatic value of yes, we're in a quantum plenum that's changing every second and every moment, and causality is something that does exist, and antecedent causes lead to precedent, or precedent causes lead to antecedent causes. So, um,
Those are my
you know,
assumptions, but I'm always
these
willing.
are physicalist assumptions, though, right? This
Yeah,
this is all because all roads lead to metaphysics, and we're essentially talking about how do we disprove causality so that we can fit free will and determinism into the same definition that gives it a broader systematic view to where we can have many different tapestries.
that's a great question. How do we get that definition? I and we can spend 1,000 hours trying to get this definition.
Fuck it.
I'm not. We're not going to, of course. But I
Oh
want
we
shit!
to.
I
went
was
a
about to
thousand.
start pitching.
I
Dog,
just want
a
to
thousand
just.
hours is like a month. Or no, it's 1,000 hours is like fucking 4 months. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go
I
ahead.
just want to display my aesthetic of having this sort of conversation where we try and get to know the terms that we're going to be using in order to create a platform, a social landscape, dare I say, in order for us to progress and achieve some goal that all of us intelligibly agree on. Maybe we could have separating goals and still achieve our ends through the same means. Who knows? But I think that this style of thinking is necessary rather than just the yes, there are moments for therapy and shooting the shit with the boys, right? Where I can just
To say that, are you saying that free will is necessary?
in certain language games, I would say
It would have to be
free will
necessary
is necessary. Yeah, in a
to
lot of
be
them.
well. Besides language games, I guess including them, to be necessary metaphysically, something can't have a contradiction.
Um, And that's kind of why I asked Dale earlier if he can give me an example of certain mathematical domains that have different presuppositions that get to the same goal. So I don't know about the whole non-contradiction thing. I tend to believe that it is a necessity, along with the what is it, excluded middle.
Well, we know that
Um,
if we get into paraconsistent logic and we utilize the functionality of dialetheism and understand that P and not P might be the same thing at sometimes, if we do that, then Aristotle said we would get to the principle of explosion. And if you work it out on a whiteboard, it pretty much means that you can prove any premise or conclusion that you want to. And
that's my
that's why
issue.
paraconsistent logics are very hard to understand, because they're attempting to solve that principle of explosion where non-contradiction breaks down.
You also have trivialists, which just accept explosion and just
Oh
say,
yeah,
"Yeah,
they do. Do you,
everything's
do
true."
you accept explosion?
And they're trolly because they can be like, "You're a trivialist. Prove you're not. Say
Oh,
something a
I know.
trivialist wouldn't say."
I know. Do you believe in explosion, or do you think it's impossible?
I mean, it takes the. I think it's just another like apparition of the human mind. So it exists as like if I think it's a belief system. Like you could believe it's true, and you could inhabit it and believe that you could just say anything's true and make it true through
Well,
your
the
own
reason why I believe the laws of logic are true
volition.
is because they constantly provide their usefulness, and to get rid of them, we would have to use them. So that's the only reason I trust them implicitly, not absolutely, because I do know there are good arguments for against the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of the excluded middle. All of those have arguments against them. The fuzzy logic would probably argue against the law of the excluded middle, that there is no middle ground between is and is not, or true and not true.
Gotcha.
There's this weird tetralemma that I've been thinking about. Is not true false?
Uh,
Is that the only other option as a definition, or is false
no,
different
no.
than not true?
I think that it would be true that that is false. That it is that that truth is. Okay, say it again. You were right. It would be false. It ended with false, and the fact that it's false is a true statement, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean now. Yeah.
Whatever it
I got
was,
lost there for a minute. I thought you were talking about something. I was like,
it
what?
is not true.
Yeah, is
False.
not true the same thing as false? Like
Yes.
logically, if we're speaking in classical logics, is not true an actual thing? But because technically, not true could be bananas, right? It's just not true.
Uh.
So when you're looking at the options in like on a logic, like on a sheet of paper, you could say not true doesn't necessarily mean false, because not true could mean bananas.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
You'd
yeah.
have
It's
to
like,
include.
does the king of France have a beard? Or no, the king of France has a beard. Well, that's not false because there's no king of France. It has like a presumption
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that that I mean, you could call it false, but it's more just not true because it's
Don't we
Okay.
just say
assuming
then?
So you do think that not true and false are identical?
well, I think it depends on how, like, it's all on how you think about it.
Well,
It shows
it's called the tetralemma, and I don't think many people really give it thought, because I think a lot of
I
people
got it.
just say not true is false.
I figured. I
That's what
figured
they
it
yeah.
say.
out. I figured it out.
What
Oh,
is
I broke the code,
it? Okay, break
and it's
break it
gonna
for us, brother.
it's gonna include many motifs that we've talked about
Okay,
earlier.
good.
Yes to your answer. Is not true. False. Yes. Now, when you bring up things like the banana, you have to include certain axioms that would necessarily falsify whether it's going to be a banana or not. So there's going to be axioms that include, or all possible things, this paperclip, my phone,
I
all
was just saying
infinite.
it's not necessarily bananas, as in like when I say not true, like when I say not true, I'm not necessarily saying anything other than that it is not true. It could, you could have true and oatmeal. Maybe that's the dichotomy. You know what I'm saying? Like This
I
is the problem
disagree.
that I always come
I
up to. It's a
okay. I got
problem
it.
with my brain.
I
It's a
got it.
problem with my brain and trying to understand the not true false thing. It's
I got it.
my
I got
issue.
it. I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
True and false are necessarily the beginning dichotomy. It's not elephant and false. It's not penguin and true. It's true and false is necessarily that's an abstract. That's what it is. It's an abstract thing. If you want
Okay.
to bring in penguins and you want to bring in bananas and all of this stuff, that's going to be extended from this first basic abstract dichotomy, true and false. If you want to extend onto that some axioms that include an elephant and false being a dichotomy,
No,
that is something extended
See,
from this
I was
abstract.
mainly just questioning. You're right, Perry. I was just mainly questioning the law of the excluded middle. I think you're correct in everything that you say. I think that true probably is false. Or not true is false. True
Necessarily,
is false is fucking. I'm
true,
crazy. Ah.
true and false are
exploded.
necessarily.
I'm sorry, Perry. Go ahead, buddy.
True and false are necessarily. If the word necessary means anything and sufficient in words like that, yes, it
I
is
When
mean,
you're talking
necessarily.
about evidence, you're using the words necessary and sufficient. When you're talking about causality, you're using the words necessary and contingent.
What about labeling things like identity or law of excluded middle?
That is going to be part of modality, like possibility and impossibility, or true or false. Those are modalities, right? Like an alethic modality would be like a good or bad. It dichotomizes.
Okay.
Um, hmm. What's a better way to say with that? So I'm gonna go look up an argument against the law of the excluded middle real quick.
Okay.
I'm so I'm so interested in this. Like, okay,
Because isn't the law of the
arguments.
excluded middle just a dichotomy?
Sorry, this is taking me a while to type
so
because I'm a grandmother.
I think
Uh,
I think there are kinds of logic that use a true, not true, false, not false setup.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
well, atheism tries to do that. The way that Matt Dillahunty describes atheism is that he's saying atheism is saying not true. They're not saying false. Have you
That might
noticed that?
that might solve the banana issue and the elephant issue.
Yeah, because you could. I'm. This is just my intuition that not true might mean bananas, and the only
Right.
reason I say that is because you're not necessarily saying false. I. I.
Right.
I don't know if I agree with the idea that possibility has to be proven, empirically, and impossibility impossibility has to be proven empirically before we say whether something is possible or impossible. Like we can't
Yeah.
even have a modal conversation until we have empirical data that something is indeed possible.
Well, are you talking about logical possibilities or physical possibilities?
Logical possibilities,
What about
everything's possible. Fucking
Potential possibility.
unicorns farting foam multiverses.
It's like if I can't talk about possibilities without proving it's possible, then can I talk about potential possibilities? Possible possibles? Like what when do you stop me? It's be like, well, what if that possibility was possibly true? Like it could be, we don't know. You just shove it down another layer forever. An infinite regress of
It just
possible.
says it just basically says LEM, law of excluded middle, is not accepted as a valid axiom in the theory of fuzzy sets because it does not apply to situations where classes have not where they don't have sharp defined boundaries. Between the 0 and the 1. LEM is also untrue in many valued logic, like as ternary logic, fuzzy logic, paraconsistent logic, or the paraconsistent logic is not a many valued logic; it's a deviant logic. But the many valued logics, I'll have to go look up the definition for why it doesn't necessarily use the law of the excluded middle. But right now, just trust ChatGPT. We'll trust it for the moment because it seems to be correct. But um, seeming to be correct doesn't mean we are correct, though. That would be a fallacy, a cognitive bias, also. Blah blah
That
blah.
seems to
So
be right.
we've kind. I'm sorry.
That seems to be right.
Yeah. So let's look up. Let's see if Wikipedia has um, arguments against. Okay, this philosophy stack exchange. Are there exceptions to the principle of excluded middle? Should there be exceptions in classical? Ah.
It's going to say something about paraconsistent logic, I bet.
Yeah, it's going to say this is joined the principle of identity and the principle of non-contradiction. Yes, yes, yes. In other words, it's a tool. Yes, duh. How to treat this is Quora. I'm reading the top answer just to see if there's anything there. I'm not seeing anything that's given me. Let me look on Wikipedia because I
Mm.
think if everybody wants to follow along, we'll go to Wikipedia and we'll look up law of excluded middle. I think that's how it is. Law of excluded middle.
I have learned that in Boolean logic, they not true just means false.
Yes, that's a two valued logic, right? That's not a many valued.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Is Boolean
Okay,
logic
okay.
paraconsistent?
Say again.
Is Boolean logic paraconsistent?
No, it's
No,
just a
no. It is a
standard.
two valued classical logic.
All right, continue.
Well, it's a formal logic. It's mainly for computer systems. Um, so the tetralemma is an ancient alternative to the law of the excluded middle, which examines all four possible arguments of truth values to a proposition and its negation. It has been important in Indian and Buddhist logic as well as ancient Greek philosophical school known as Pyrrhonism. Many modern logical systems replace the law of the excluded middle with the concept of negation as failure. And let's get into this. Instead of a proposition's being either true or false, a proposition is either true or not able to be proven true. These two dichotomies only differ in logical systems that are not complete. Um, I don't know how we could argue that there are complete logical systems, but I'm not an expert in um,
Um,
many valued
I
logic.
know. I
It
know
says
some.
let me read
Go
this
ahead.
real quick. I'm sorry, Dal.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The principle of negation as failure is used as a foundation for auto epistemologic. Ooh, that's an interesting one. Auto epistemic logic. It's a formal logic for the representation and reasoning of knowledge about knowledge. So it's a meta thing, and is widely used in logic programming. Um, so also, Leg Bauer and Arend Hating have also contested the usefulness of the law of the excluded middle in the content of modern mathematics. So that's something else. There are other there are other what criticisms. There are other criticisms here, but it seems to be the main one that there's something in between true and not true or true and false. There's something in between. There's some fuzziness or some paraconsistence.
Then
Is
can
that
I just say that sure, there's X in between true and not true. Is there something in between true and X? Or
I
is
don't
that
know.
where the law of the excluded middle would then shift to?
No,
Yeah.
yeah, there are uncountably many
Right.
valued logics that just have uncountably many values in between them
That's
all.
correct.
But there's still something separating the two, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't. Maybe you would be able to make a new value in between any two, or maybe it's just like an infinite. So I
Yeah.
don't know the size
It's
of the infinity that they'd be using.
I don't know.
All right, here, listen to this. Many valued logic, also called multiple valued logic, is a propositional calculus, which is propositional logic, in which there are more than two truth values. Traditionally, in Aristotle's logical calculus, which would be Aristotelian logic, there were only two possible values, true and false, for any proposition. Classical two valued logic may be extended to n valued logic, which is any, for n greater than 2. Those most popular in the literature are three valued, which I'd say the names of these people who do it, but I can't pronounce them. Just Jesus Christ. Um, True, false, and unknown is a three valued logic. Four valued, nine valued, finite valued with more than three values is more than two. So I guess three and up. Uh,
Mhm.
there's also infinite valued logics, which I don't even know what that gets into. That's probably some very fringe.
Why would
Maybe it's
we?
not fringe. I just haven't done enough study on many valued logic yet.
What's an example of a scenario where we would deploy this infinite value logic? What is this
Let's
useful
see.
for?
Let's see.
Or three or nine,
It's
whatever.
a good
In
question.
logic, an infinite in sorry, in logic, an infinite valued logic is a many valued logic in which truth values comprise a continuous range. Traditionally, in Aristotle's logic other than bivalent logic, which is 0 and 1, was abnormal, as the law of the excluded middle precluded more than two possible values. So that's what he followed. Modern three valued logic allows for an additional possible truth value. It's not telling me about.
So it's just
So
anything
I'm
which
guessing fuzzy logic is an infinite uh, because it's a spectrum. So
and
any of the spectrum logics are going to be infinite valued logics.
it would correspond to our fuzzy language games also, I think
Mhm.
we would just deploy these three or four whatever if we found a scenario where, well, we have in reality four different distinct corresponding values. um Therefore we would apply that same logic to it. I have no clue how you would do that, of course.
You got me. I have no idea. Like
I don't I don't know if it's
the the
even
the
money or
the
useful, but
us making just to change the subject a little, not change it from logic, but us cutting up the world into these logical pieces is just that. It's a socially constructed thing. The
yep.
idea of the law of the excluded middle is just a pattern that we recognize in reality, and we give it bivalence, we give it digitalness. Whereas, like, if you want to think about it in terms of music, the universe is analog. The universe is not digital. It may be down to strings or something like that. Maybe it's digital at that point, but nothing in the universe is actually digital. That's all mental or technology that we've created to just mimic the mental. Um,
Hmm.
we're trying to cut up things into exact pieces that are not exact pieces, like the law of identity. Is something always itself? Well, the answer, if you consider process philosophy as in change is always happening, then nothing is ever itself ever again, always, 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 always.
Right.
Infinite regress.
I love I love
So
that one.
yeah. So if we had a static universe, maybe the law of identity would be absolute.
Right.
But I'm not sure.
You could even say in a dynamic universe, the entirety of the dynamic universe is one in itself.
Yes, you could. So that at least answers it for me. I mean, I guess I'm gonna have to conclude that at least within the logics that make sense to me right now, you know, bivalence, true and false seem to be the only options, at least within these formal frameworks. You know
You
what I
want
mean? They're
you want
they're
to know
abstract.
you want to know what I think? I think that the way I hear people say things like philosophy isn't useful is what I think about logic sometimes. I think that there are so many different logics that you can concoct, yet only a small percentage of them are actually used when we try and interact with the world we live in and phenomenally experience. I don't think that we use anywhere close to a third of some of these things that some people have. Now, maybe so. I don't know. Maybe it's
Some
all
of
in the
these logics are
science,
almost like some of these logics are almost like calculus or algebra, to where they're attempting to understand things deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's just like
and
the
that's
fringe
fair.
of math. The fringe of mathematics is not useful. The people that are doing theoretical mathematics, none of that stuff is useful yet.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It's
Yeah.
it's a slow burn for a
Yeah.
big reward at some point, perhaps when they finally break through the boundaries of what seemed like gobbledygook now all makes
Well,
sense. I mean, I could
Mm.
put some faith and hope in that.
I think we should invent as many possible maths as we can, and then make an AI, a language model, train it on all the different types of maths and logic that we can come up with, and then have maybe that would be a good problem like tackler. Like it'd be a good AI to come up to a new problem, and it could invent a new math on the spot
Yeah.
to handle the problem at hand. I think stuff like that is what the future holds, and I think that's why we should invest in as much of the knowledge stuff right now and not blow it up or anything. I mean,
So
not saying that anyone here was, but I'm just
so
in
what you're
general.
saying is to create an AI generator that not only solves problems but creates problems as well, and then solves those problems ad infinitum.
I mean, I want it to be able to generate a new mathematics system from scratch on the spot to kind of to handle some problem. Like, imagine the black holes. They go to infinity. We don't know what's going on inside them. Well, let's have a computer, and we've done this. We've had a bunch of them do this. A computer try to figure it out by just like inventing a new kind of math in order to describe what's actually happening there or
Hmm.
whatever. Um,
There are some math problems like the millennial math problems that if we could get a handle on, we could solve a ridiculous amount of things within technology, especially in computing. Um, so maybe those will be figured out one day, and we'll have answers to some of the fusions between different logics. You know what I mean? Um,
Plus, I think like if we get quantum computing to work like they say it'll work on top of all these different kinds of like math things, who knows what the hell we're
I
gonna
don't
come
know.
up with?
I don't know.
It's just
Remember,
crazy.
remember the quote that you weren't there for it, but I, IBM's founder or CEO at the time in like 1942 said there might be compute quote there might be computers one day that are less than 1.5 tons,
That's funny.
I don't know
yeah,
what any of the implications of those numbers mean.
as in the 1.5 tons back in the 40s would be ridiculous because it took an entire room, tons and tons of material with vacuum tubes, um, not transistors, to compute, just simple mathematics and things like that.
Oh,
Um,
we're way more efficient nowadays.
yeah, I mean the owner of IBM, the height of technology, he would be aware of the height of technology back then, and he was saying that one day we would have computers that would be less than 1.5 tons. He was so wrong because we are way further than that down the line.
Hmm.
I was just kind of agreeing with Dow.
Hmm. Yeah, who knows what the fuck shit's gonna be like in 50 years,
Can
100
you imagine
years,
if you introduce
200.
ChatGPT to somebody in like the 80s when computers were actual personal computers? You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I think pretty soon, like I give it 50 years, and you're gonna be walking down the street, and some fucking thing comes up with a person that looks like a real person who's talking to you, and you like get rid of them. They're like annoying you, and you like swipe them away on this. There's like an ad for something, and then it keeps happening again and again until it's a person you respond to. And it's just like they're like a friendly person, and they're just like, yeah, and they convince you to buy that. Like it's going to be so tailorable and so convincing, and so like you can just generate a beautiful person to walk up to you who's genuinely interested in you, and just like it doesn't say it outright. They aren't too
Yeah.
overbearing, but really they just want you to buy Twinkies. That's their ultimate goal.
Yeah, to coerce you into paying lifetime stocks for like fucking Hostess or whatever.
hmm
Yeah.
well, my boys, what else do you have on your minds? I can find something to talk about forever, but I've had a great time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm I'm
we almost hit 2 hours now.
I'm juiced
Yeah,
out.
I think we're good. I think we're good, guys. Everybody who came to watch, we appreciate you. We love you. Um, Spread the science education.
Oh, yeah.
Please subscribe to my channel. Perry also has a channel. Dalsu has one, but he's being lax at the moment.
Yeah, I'm lax.
Uh,
Don't come
it's
there.
okay. We'll get it going one day. Um, please subscribe to Pangburn on YouTube and go there because what it was June 1st, I think, is when Alex O'Connor and Dinesh D'Souza are going to speak. So please definitely come to that. Where is it, Dal? Do you know? Anybody know where it's
New
at?
York.
New York. Okay. All right. Well, there's going to be information on that on Pangburn's YouTube and his probably his website. Is it the War of Ideas, Dal?
I don't know. I'm too
I wish I
stoned.
had this information memorized, guys. I'm sorry about that, but just go to Pangburn YouTube and he's advertising the hell of it on there, so you'll get the information. But
Always
regardless,
try to consider that your actions have an effect on other people outside of yourself.
yes,
Absolutely. These are the consequences.
yes. All right. Well, boys, we are going offline. We love y'all. See you later.
Bloop, bloop.